Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond. I'm laughing because Heather This is Heather Wurtele, everybody. Hi. Welcome. And I'm laughing because, we are here about bringing experts across the field of training, nutrition, recovery, female physiology. And I'm really thrilled to bring you, a retired professional triathlete that had an incredible career, and that is Heather Wurtele. And so an expert of how do you last? Really, how do you last and keep performing over the longevity of the whole career? And let me just tell you a little bit, and then Heather, then we're going to let you talk for the rest of the time. But this is Heather's this is what she's accomplished. And she had 7 IRONMAN wins. She had 25 70.33 wins. And that's just wins. That's just like the top of the podium. That isn't we don't even know the number of how many times that she actually climbed the third or the second rung. That was just top of the podium. 4 world championship podiums. And the other thing that I will say about Heather is just the great respect of all the people that she raced with and alongside, and because of just who she brought herself to being every time that she, towed the line or was in a race. And I was privileged to be there in that environment and with you. So thank you, Heather, for joining us.
Oh, thank you for the nice intro. It's funny, I don't look back and think about results per se. You just sort of have this feeling of wow, that was a great career. I was so fortunate to do it. But then when you kind of listen, you're like, oh yeah, damn, I did it.
Dang.
Over years. And it does kind of feel good to oh yeah, right, remember all those times. And I was very fortunate to have a good long career and kind of be able to end it on my terms and go out in a way that I wanted. So that was good. I got lucky retiring in 2009, that's for sure, before the whole COVID situation and stuff. So
and what I really want to share, and the reason why I asked Heather to join us is because I believe that we can learn so much. We think of professional athletes and those at the top of the game, because that's where Heather was. She was the top, she was the cream, of the whole profession. And what do we sometimes think as recreational athletes, but I'm not there, I'm not them. And they're something special, and they are. Heather, you are special, but not to take it away.
Not really, right? Yeah.
But what is special is the things, and this is what I really want to tap into, are the things that you did that every single person has access to. And it was certainly not the things that I understood until I, was done my career. And that's what I look and I see, and I have the utmost respect for how you navigated. And it was partly because you did it for so long. So I want to know how and I want other people to know that learning journey for you, because then people can also say, okay, I'm on a journey. And I'll just say one more thing and then we're going to get into it. I said, it's so perfect that you said, I don't even think about the wins, because it was the experience that you were in. It wasn't about the finish lines necessarily, although those are nice. It was something more. And so let's get into that. So the first question I have, just to kind of get us right into it, is, okay, first, so we're sitting down. People have no idea how tall you are. So
tell us. And I sit down at normal height because I have no torso whatsoever. I'm all legs. So
she's all legs. So
I'm 6'1".
6'1".
So well above the average height, world height for men, on the extreme end. I remember actually Torstenrad was doing like a profile of just kind of looking at heights and weights and whatever in the sport to show how broad of a range triathlon was. And I was so much of an outlier. They're like, oh, we're excluding you from the graph because you're just messing everything up. So yeah, no. So when that was a big sort of hurdle for me when I first started the sport, was people said, well, no world-class triathletes are that tall. Like, you can't be fast being that tall. And it was something that, like, I didn't fundamentally believe it, but you hear it enough times, you know, and it starts to sort of affect your psyche a little bit. And it did take me a while to think of myself as a runner. That was actually, because again, it was like the world-class marathoners and stuff are like, just their body types in general, they're really petite and light and fast. And so you sort of had this mental block, like, oh, well, that's not me. And, you know, and I don't look the same way as a lot of these other athletes. So that was probably my biggest struggle in early days in the sport, was just going, okay, well, it doesn't matter what I look like. It matters what I can do. And as I do this more and more and train, like, I'm running fast times, and I can run fast half marathon and be competitive and be speedy. And so that positive self-talk definitely took a while to develop. But yeah, that was sort of a hurdle for me in my career at the beginning.
At the very beginning, and I didn't mention that you had the career from 2007 to 2019. So that, yeah, that's so that was 12 years. And so when you started, tell us how you started, just a little bit, like where you began with your career. Did you start right at IRONMAN, or did you progress into it, or?
I had a pretty rapid progression. My first ever race was like the sprint distance at UBC, you know, where you swim in the laps in the pool, and then you do a little bike ride around the campus, and then run. And then or maybe it was an Olympic distance, and on that bike I got a flat tire, and it was like this big stressful event, and I like fixed it by myself on the side of the road and got going again. So like, I didn't have a very good time. And then I went and did the New Balance half Ironman in Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a really good race, like won my age group, and everyone's like, well, who this person? She doesn't have any good results, and her previous one had a horrible bike time. Like, what's that? And I was like, oh, I had a flat tire and whatever. And then
and she's tall.
Yeah, she's tall. What the and then pretty shortly after that, I did Ironman Coeur d'Alene, and I won the whole age group race there. And I remember very vividly when I was doing that race, I just had, like, it was my first ever one. I did it in like 10:20 or something like that, which was pretty decent. It was a very hard course back then, a different route than it became in the future. And I remember the marathon run going like, hey, like, I'm kind of good at this. I'm just having this feeling like, if I was like really properly training and focused on it, it was that sort of spark of like, oh, you know, I could maybe do pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that was back in, when were some of these first events? 2004, 2005, and then I went to Norway and did PhD work and whatever. And so I didn't start seriously doing the sport until 2006, 2007. So yeah, and it kind of progressed pretty rapidly. I won Ironman Coeur d'Alene my first as a pro in 2007 or 2008. See, I'm horrible with dates. This is another thing. Some people know, like, every time, every date, every race, and I'm just like, that was sometime.
It was the journey anyway, right? And so
then, my husband and I we both just committed to being full-time athletes, and then we started that in 2009.
And then you, so perfect. Okay. So it started at so UBC is University of British Columbia. That's what that meant. And it's literally like a little loop-de-loops. And that's how often most people start. Now they don't take it to a professional level, which you did, of course, but tell us about how you learned about performance and how did you balance? And because, you know, then we think about it, you know, the pillars. So nutrition, I want to hear a little bit more about your nutrition. I want to hear about your recovery and why it was that you, like, literally, unlike so many athletes, kept going. Yeah.
Well, I was a little bit fortunate in that I had a bit of a high performance background in that I rode varsity at UBC when I was University of British Columbia, when I was there doing my undergrad degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very competitive program. So I was on the water almost every day at like 4:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also going to UBC on an academic scholarship, and I had to keep 85% average and have a full course load. So I was just like working my butt off academically and rowing and training. And I was just constantly tired and I got sick, like deathly ill at the end of pretty much every semester.
Wow.
And so that was really a lesson to me in how important recovery was and how unsustainable not sleeping enough was. And yeah, that just became actually really draining. And so I burnt out kind of rowing. And when I had a choice of like, okay, I can try and make national team, whatever, in rowing, I was like, no, I'm going to focus on academics, because it was all just sort of too much.
Right. Yeah.
And so I definitely benefited from that past experience when I went again from like being an academic to going, hey, you know what? I kind of gave up very high level sport at one point to focus on something else, and now, you know, I have this opportunity maybe to excel at this other sport, and my body is only young once, but you know, hopefully my brain will be fine for a long time. So I jumped in 100% doing that. But I had a lot of like, sleep was so important, and I think from rowing I was really scarred with like getting up early. So I'm like, so you know, getting up at 4 to go swim at 6 with a club, I was like, no, I'm like, the one of the benefits of being a professional was I could just sleep, and I could, and that was such a huge thing for me, was getting 10 hours of sleep, 9, 10, 11, ideally 12 if I was really tired, hours of sleep a night, because I absolutely needed it to recover. And so that was something that I think I learned from that, but that became really valuable in my career, was just like sleeping a ton. Rest was so important, and it was something that I had learned to really value from that.
Did you ever have troubles when you like, or get pressure from any like the training environments that you put yourself into, that was too much, or did you really fight for it? Did you just have a really strong understanding that that's just what you needed and went with it?
Yeah, no, yeah, it was just like, it's 8 o'clock. I'm really tired. I'm going to bed. I never felt like I had to stay up, or like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I'm like the lame one that goes to bed, but it was fine because I needed sleep. And we did go to various training camps, but Trevor and I, you know, we traveled around in our RV. And so we had that sort of self-contained unit where we could, like, that was where we just slept and ate, and then kind of the rest of the time we were training. And even if we went to training camps, you know, and rented like a squad apartment that we all stayed in or whatever, I was very much like, everyone shut up, bedtime. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just something that it really was really important. And I think actually it kind of rubs off, because everyone goes, oh, okay, well, she's doing really well and she's sleeping a lot and really benefiting from that. So maybe we should all put our phones down and
Pay attention.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Really interesting, because it wasn't necessarily, you know, recovery wasn't talked about it as much as it is now. It seems like there's like a resurgence of like, oh, recovery matters. And I think
Yeah,
that
it's really
particular,
funny hearing now, like, oh, you need to sleep. Like, yeah, no doubt, of course you do. But it's like, yeah, there's a lot more focus on that, and eating enough and whatever. And I guess some of it is like sort of so obvious to me that I kind of don't think maybe enough about how how important it is for people to hear that. Because for me, it was just like, well, of course I need to just like eat a ton to sustain the training that I'm doing. And that was actually the battle, was to eat enough. It was never about, oh, I need to restrict calories or try and do fasted anything. It was just like, how do I get enough calories in to sustain the training that I'm doing?
So tell us a little bit more about that. So you were fortunate that, I mean, you put you were in a position, unlike many athletes, myself included, that had disordered eating, that how do you eat more? Because you never worried, or it wasn't a power to weight. You weren't encouraged to figure out your power to weight or anything like that. It was, how do I eat more? And then tell us some of the strategies, like, I don't know, maybe, confessing to all your chocolate bar Cheeto, delving into chocolate bars and Cheetos to try to keep up that caloric content.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, partly I just was very fortunate to grow up in an environment. I think it starts, at home with my family. We were all tall, high metabolism people, and we just ate a lot, and it was okay to eat a lot. Like, if you came home from school, and like, I remember, geez, when me and my brother were going through our growth spurts, we'd come home and we each eat like a whole box of Kraft dinner as a snack, and then we would still have like 3 servings at dinner. Like, I don't know how my parents afforded it, but it was just like, I was fortunate to never have any sort of shame around food, or my parents also, though, we ate very healthy, but it wasn't like you could eat your fill kind of thing. You could have lots of vegetables. You did. So and we also, everyone in my family and Trevor's too, we get really hangry really easily. So it's pretty funny. Like, we're always like, yeah, here, please have a snack. Like, you need an apple. Like, you can't make a decision right now. So I've always kind of, I don't know, it's just like aware that, like, no, food is like, you need food to make good decisions and like be with it mentally and perform. So I think it started at an early age that I was fortunate enough to not have any sort of shame around needing to eat or stuff like that. I do remember, all women go through that phase, like, and it happened to me when I was a rower, in your late teens, early 20s, you just get bigger and sort of softer and your body changes. And there were issues around sort of that changing dynamic. But I was also, at that point, I was in a heavyweight 8 women's rowing team. So it was all about being strong. No one cared. Like, so I didn't have any issues around that. So I got kind of lucky there too, I guess. I wasn't in a sport where it was about power to weight. It was like power.
It was like, you just got to be strong. Yeah.
Yeah, you just need to be strong. And then, living with my husband, he really struggles to keep weight on. So I guess in that respect, needing to eat enough was always at the forefront. And so, it was just lucky that way in a way. And also, but also I just, like, we would go swim and then I would be like super grumpy after, and it's like, okay, well, I need food right now,
Right.
And it was just one of those things that it was very apparent. And so you learned as you're training how to deal with that, like, especially in a big Ironman block, on say a Sunday is a long swim, a long bike, and a run off the bike. There is no way you're replacing all of the calories that you burnt on that day, right? Even if after you get off your ride, you have a big high calorie smoothie, I would like add olive oil, avocados, like everything to the smoothie to try and get as many calories as I could. But then still the next day, you're behind. And so Monday was like, have a big pancake breakfast and like have more smoothies and like sort of try and stuff your face all day so that your performance didn't go downhill on Tuesday when usually I had hard sessions again. And it just became, I don't know, I was able to learn, like, okay, if I don't fuel properly or recover or, hydrate, get enough electrolytes, and then my performance visibly declines by that Tuesday. And so it just became really sort of obvious ties to nutrition that I could just focus on.
What I think is so valuable, and why I really wanted to have this conversation, is because we think sometimes that, like professional athletes, they are really pushing the edge. That's what you do. You train a lot, you train hard. And I think what is so incredible is that you did it so almost like you've kept focusing on the performance and what the most fundamental basic things. Sleep.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think it's very easy to get wrapped up in that, like the 1%, right? The little tweaks and whatever, when really the big drivers of performance are. So to perform well, you have to train really consistently over a long period of time. To train really consistently over a long period of time, you need to not be injured. You need to be well rested enough to execute each of those sessions every day to the best of your ability. And so to be able to do that, what you have to focus on is sleeping and eating and trying to recover between each of those sessions, because it's like, it sort of just comes down to being as simple as that. Like, and actually that was one of the most refreshing things for me when I retired, was all of my decisions every day didn't have to revolve around trying to do the best thing for that performance the next day. So I was like, I can be tired tomorrow. It doesn't matter. Like, I'll just stay up and like, cause it's not about trying to nail my tempo around tomorrow or trying to eat the right things so I don't have GI distress because I have to run off the bike, or, you know, so so all those things just kind of, but it was like by focusing on that performance, it really always came back to making decisions to do those fundamental things just so you could execute your training the best you could.
And what's interesting, and like we can extend that out. I mean, we might not be wanting to be world champions, but we do want to perform in our life. And this is what it's about. Like, performance isn't just getting to the like, you know, as a professional athlete, that was performance. It was matching the tempo runs or whatever it was. But here is, you know, athletes getting to a start line. It's about, how do I be and show up for my life? And it doesn't matter what your performance is. You're performing for being present with your loved ones, being present for your career, being like all the other pieces. It's the same thing. You still need to sleep and eat as the basic pieces, right? And yet we think, and we often put that as like, okay, well, yeah, but I got to get my run in, or I've got to, you sacrifice those other pieces to do the physical, because that's what you think we need to do all the time sometimes, Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, can we talk about your period?
Sure. Yeah. It's a tricky thing, like time management. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, and it sometimes is hard to know, okay, well, is resting more important than squeaking this other workout in? And I was just sort of fortunate to have a coach that had a really big picture view that sort of kept me on track and could see, like, no, you need to rest more or whatever, when I could be aware of that myself. But also it's just something you sort of learn over time. And as age group athletes, I mean, performing is one thing, but it's also enjoying it, presumably, right? And so you need to really balance, like, okay, well, what's making you enjoy it, and to what extent do you need to sacrifice other things to get that run in, or to do extra training, when maybe the best thing is to just chill with your kids for the night, and so those things are important.
Okay, so your period now, because I would hate to have a conversation without, menstrual cycles coming up. Did you have an awareness, and how did that impact? Like, we're talking about to perimenopausal women, so they will, some women still have a regular period, but they might be starting to feel symptoms of, hot flashes, and then all of a sudden their cycle will go crazy. So we have a big assortment of people we're talking to here. So how did you factor that in to training and life? Did it get?
Yeah, well, so when you mentioned perimenopausal, I had to look up what it was, because I'm like, is that me? I don't know. But no, so I have this normal cycle now, and I did pretty much throughout my career, and it was actually a marker that if I missed one, I was like, oh shit, like I need to eat more, or rest more, or get more iron, or it was a sign of things weren't perfect. So and it was definitely something in my training log with my coach. He was kind of old school and just had an Excel spreadsheet, and I would just make a square pink and I would just sort of track it, because it was a pretty reliable that 4 days or a week out, I would have a really shitty bike session, and you'd feel certain ways, and you're like, oh, what's wrong, my training? And you're like, oh no, it's my period is coming. Those things yeah, those became sort of markers and ways that you could, yeah, understand your training and
Yeah. So it did make a difference to you. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I never did it. Some people, did various birth control techniques and stuff. I never did anything like that. I just wanted to sort of uh, keep my hormones and everything as natural as possible. I felt like that worked for me. I definitely did have times where, you felt like your performance was suboptimal because of where you were in your cycle. And it was just one of those things where I was just like, wow, that's just life. So,
Yeah.
it's,
And
yeah, it was
you
just something
rolled
women
with it.
have to deal with, I think. But
Huh. It is truly remarkable because, I'm just going to come back to the point that you had 7 Ironman wins, 25 70.3 wins, 4 world championship podiums. And it seems like it just was almost, it just worked. And I guess this is the point that I really, I'm excited to share is it worked because you had the fundamentals. And that's what you see when you see somebody showing up for 12 years. I would like doing the math quickly here on podiums and consistently like that. This is what sleep, nutrition, having hormone health is. I mean, yes, you have genetics. Yes, you have those other pieces. But I would say beyond that, that wasn't the most fundamental thing. It was these other pieces that made you get to that final rung.
yeah, I mean, it's always a case of nature and nurture, right? I mean,
Yeah.
some people, like, I think I'm very lucky. I have a good sort of genetic base, no like bone density issues in my family, pretty good. So some people come from a place of like, oh, okay, they get stress fractures really easily, and that's just sort of a genetic thing that then compounds and makes it even more difficult, missteps in nutrition or missteps in training. So I was for sure lucky in that respect, but I also was, yeah, really aware and had a team of people around me that, like I remember Kona was always a real struggle for me, just the heat and humidity. I have an incredibly high sweat rate. So just replacing those fluids was always a big deal. And my coach was always just like, you need more carbohydrates. It was always people just trying to be like, you need more fluids. Like you're getting too thin for this kind of thing. And so, yeah, those things over time, for sure, it all just added up to longevity and having, a coach too, I think that had a very long-term perspective. So it was a lot of really hard training all those years, but it was sustainable, like really pretty consistent loads over time, building gradually. I didn't have a lot of like massive epic sessions and then like rest days and then massive smash myself. It was like just sort of the pressure was on all the time, day after day, but I could kind of recover from that day and execute the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day.
Yeah.
And in coaching athletes, I find people get bored actually pretty easily with that type of training.
Yeah.
It's just sort of boring, but it works. Like, and so that's another thing, like getting your head wrapped around, okay, it's not really rocket science. It's not necessarily these epic things, but it's just doing the work day after day after day. And
yeah,
often it's kind of boring, but you just have to keep doing it.
Yeah. And just finding the fun, the little things that are kind of like, oh, I was able to do this today, or, oh, I was able to do this in technique, or finding other, joys in it. Yeah.
For me, for sure, like the joy would be, oh, I'm going to go do this tempo run in Snow Canyon or go do like, yeah, I really get a lot of love and happiness of being in the outdoors in spectacular environments. So for me, it was like finding places that inspire me outside to train so I could be smashing myself, but I was just happy about it because I was surrounded by beautiful trees or whatever. And so those little things and knowing those things that make you happy are important. Like I think a lot of people go, oh, well, you can execute better. You should always ride on the trainer. But if the trainer sucks the joy out of riding a bike, then maybe you shouldn't always be on the trainer,
Right.
And so it's knowing those things about yourself and how you can best get the training done and also like be happy with it and enjoy yourself. That's really important.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect spot for us to kind of, like to stay on and find the joys, find the little joys. It might not always be sexy training. It might just be, consistent training, but that is part of it, and to make sure you know where that happy spot is. So are you ready to do my rapid fire questions that I'm asking everybody?
Sure.
Okay.
I have no idea what these are, so hopefully
Nope.
I'll be rapid.
They totally are. She has no idea. Okay, ready. First one. Give us one moment of courage.
A moment of courage. Oh geez, I should have probably known these before. In racing specifically, or
it can be in anything. It's just something that you're like, man, that I kind of I had to show up there. I had to like I had to take a
geez. Honestly, my moments of courage now that I'm not a professional triathlete are anything having to do with like vertigo and mountain biking.
good new skill, taking on a new skill and saying, wow, I'm really not world class.
Yeah. No, that's actually, it's funny. You definitely take for granted world class levels of fitness at a specific thing, and then it's actually very refreshing to like totally suck at something. So it's been very enjoyable for me learning like the technical stuff of like downhill mountain biking for sure. Sorry,
Super
they're supposed
fun.
to be rapid fire. I'm pulling out
Okay.
the whole thing.
Yeah, no, that's totally okay. What are this one will be this one likely is a bit easier. Name one thing that you are grateful for right now.
My husband, Trevor.
Oh, yeah, you guys are such a pair. So awesome. All right, what is one thing that you're going to say? I am having to switch this question a little bit. What is one piece of advice you're going to give yourself as you approach perimenopause now that you know what it is?
Oh, just to be patient and understanding with the changes that are happening in your body. I think like all things is sort of women, people in general tend to be kind of too hard on themselves a lot of the time. So just being patient and trying to be nice to myself.
So awesome. So we know that we can keep following you. Where can we follow whatever it is that you're up to now that you're a retired professional triathlete?
Honestly, one of my favorite things about not being a professional athlete is just being able to completely check out of the social media space. So not having to post things and whatever, but I still do Instagram. Every now and then I'll be on Facebook a little bit, but probably Instagram is if you want to see sort of the day-to-day stuff. You'll be disappointed if you're looking for like Time Trial Tuesday or triathlon things, because it's mostly like mountain biking.
It's like, how am I enjoying my life?
Yeah, but anyway, that's what we're up to now, and
that's so cool. Well, thank you for sharing your secret sauce of how do you stay in sport for the long term, because one thing that I know about the women that I work with is that they want to keep going for the long term and want to keep being able when they're 80 to keep moving. And this still applies. This is the secret sauce. It's called sleep. It's called eating well. And being aware of your cycle and surrounding yourself with good people. So that's it. Thank you, Heather, for joining us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.